My name is Arlene Jackson, and I am a Christian in recovery from chemical dependency and codependency. Hello, friends. I love love. My sobriety date for drugs and alcohol is November 27th, 1985, and I began my recovery from codependency in 1994, and I smoked my last cigarette on April 3rd, 2000. As you can see, recovery is a process. It is a journey. It is not a destination. Recovery doesn't happen all at once. I have lived it one day at a time, and as those days progressed, things have gotten better. If you hear nothing else today, remember, life gets better with Jesus and with recovery. And the rest of this testimony tonight is just trying to prove to you that simple fact. I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1958 to two very young parents, Vincent and Annie Ugelowitz. They were 20 years old when I was born. Now, my mom was in love with my father's twin, Joe, who didn't love her back. And my father was in love with a girl named Blanche, who didn't love him back. So the only ones who were left were my parents, so they married one another instead. It is family lore that on their wedding night, my father, Vinny, whispered to my mother, Annie, "I love you, Blanche," and it was all downhill from there. My brother, Nick, was born a year after I was, and soon after, my parents got divorced. My father was never a part of my life, and my mother would remarry several times in search of the perfect man. My mother was high functioning. She was, today I suppose, she would have been diagnosed bipolar. She was very creative, she was hysterical, she was unpredictable, and I used to say that she was the meanest woman on the planet. It wasn't until I grew up that I discovered that she had been sexually molested for her entire childhood by her father, and it explained a lot. Mom finally married my stepfather, who I considered to be my real father, and they stayed married for 20 years before they also got divorced. My father was young and handsome and wild and alcoholic. He was a great dad, but he was a terrible husband. And that, coupled with the fact that my mother was literally out of her mind, made for a very violent and turbulent childhood. Jails and institutions were involved. Now, my parents gave me and my brother two more siblings, Dorothy and Billy, and now there were four of us in the great big dysfunctional mess called our family. There were many pictures in my slideshow of me and my little sister, Dorothy, as she was the baby in my arms, and so many of them when I was a little girl. The reason that there are so many pictures of me and Dorothy is that in our family, I was Dorothy's protector. Our childhood was so awful that I took on the role of taking care of her. It gave me something to concentrate on while all this really awful stuff was happening. It made me feel powerful and in control over my life to keep her safe. One favorite family story, family lore in our family, is Dorothy's first birthday party. That should all be in caps there. Now, Dorothy was my dad's first natural child. So he got, of course, really drunk the week before her birthday, and when he eventually made it home, he had invited half of New Jersey and most of New York City to a party in honor of his daughter's first birthday. And what a party it was. 200 people showed up at our house. We had 2 live bands in the backyard, and all the neighbors from up and down our street were hanging over our back fence just wondering what those crazy people were up to this time. We were that family. We had an above-ground pool, and some people were naked in there. And there were several barbecue grills and an awful lot of booze and beer and Lord only knows what else. And where was I? Well, I was 11 years old, in the living room all alone, feeding Dorothy a bottle and singing to her and loving her. Nobody even acknowledged that it was her birthday. Everyone was too busy partying. That was the way it was in our family. And eventually, That's the way it became for me. When I give my testimony, I always tell a lot about my family because for me, that's where it all started, in my family when I was young. I learned everything I knew about life from my family. And many of the lessons I learned were wrong. I learned lessons like this. Love hurts. Don't trust anyone. You have to control everything because everything is out of control. You'll never be good enough. Don't let anyone get to know you. Certainly don't show your feelings or any vulnerability. Men are always smarter than women. And men are dogs, too. But there's only really one way to get a man. Why you would want one, I don't know. Never tell the family secrets. Now, these things aren't lessons that anyone ever sat me down and told me verbally at somebody's knee. They were lessons I surmised by the way life went in my family world, the way people treated me and the way people treated each other. We were a very closed, secretive family. So it's no wonder as I got older, I had absolutely no idea of how to live life. None. I just sort of made it up as I went along. Now, when it came to God, my family was sort of Catholic. We never went to church, but I got baptized as a baby, and I made my communion in 3rd grade. You saw the pictures, the little veil and everything. I made my confirmation in 6th grade. I got to wear a nice red robe. But I didn't know what any of it meant. It was just something you did if you were sort of Catholic. I didn't know who Jesus was, except that he was born on Christmas Day. In fact, I didn't know that Easter was the resurrection of Jesus until I was over 30 years old. So I didn't have any concept of God as a child or a young adult even at all. Now, around the age of 12, I began to drink. And drugs came about not too long after that. And then boys came along right on the heels of that. It was all a recipe for chaos and disaster. My life became full of partying and smoking and drinking and drugging and sex and drugs and rock and roll and the whole thing. All my friends were doing it too, so it seemed normal to me. And really, I just didn't know any better. When I look back, I know I didn't. Now, I did very well in school because I was smart, and school came easy to me. But when I graduated high school, all my friends that I partied with went off to college, and I just didn't. Now, that was a real shocker to me, because I guess I would have gone to college, but you have to consider that nobody in my family had ever even graduated from high school. I was the first ever in family history to graduate high school. So college wasn't the norm for our people. And I was really surprised when college didn't just sort of magically happen for me. But I didn't know you had to do things to make it happen, like paperwork and procedures and such. So I just didn't go. All my smart partying friends went, and I stayed behind. So I had to think of something else to do. Well, I hung around with a motorcycle club, and a biker friend of mine suggested I become an exotic dancer. They made good money, and I figured, well, why not? It's got a lot of positive things to it. It's in a bar. There's lots of drugs and alcohol. There's a lot of men, so it sounded pretty good. And that was to be my permanent employment for the next 10 years until I got sober. During those years, I married and divorced a few people. I had 2 children, and I tried several geographic cures for my crumbling life, mostly to Texas, Florida, New York, and California. Those were my favorite geographic places. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club considered me a little sister, so I stayed protected in the clubs. But still, by the time I was 27, I had encountered the law, and aliases, and guns, and drug raids, and the mafia, and generally it was really just a downhill slide. Well, I got sober, but I got sober by mistake. I never meant to. I tried to commit suicide, and I botched it up. And somehow I ended up in the hospital with some guy from AA hanging over my hospital bed trying to tell me that I was an alcoholic and I needed to go to meetings. Well, considering at this time I didn't have anywhere else to go, My husband du jour, my husband of the day, had taken my kids and didn't want anything to do with me. So when I left that hospital that day, I went to an AA meeting with that guy. He was a guy, after all. And the rest is history. I never left. And that was 31 years ago. I appreciate your love, but I really don't deserve it because I really didn't want to get sober. But somehow, going to all those meetings taught me a few things that stuck. And I found myself staying clean and sober for the first time ever. I'm here to tell you that I have done a lot of things wrong in recovery. I waited 3 years to work my 12 steps, and I almost got drunk and put away in a straitjacket because of it. Please don't do that. Don't do that. I waited nearly 10 years to get a relationship with Jesus, and that harmed me a lot because up till then I only had a God of my own understanding, and the things that I understood about anything weren't based on any good reason or logic, so my idea of God wasn't very good either. Think about it. How can a sick mind conjure for itself a healthy God, right? So please, confirm Jesus is your higher power today if you haven't already. Just go for it. Come on, stop fighting it. Jesus is the power you want, trust me. He just is. But I can tell you that I did do as many things right as I could. Eventually, I got a sponsor. I did work the 12 steps. I did go to thousands of meetings. I did, and I still do, sponsor many people. I did lots of service work. And I prayed to the God that I didn't understand whether he was real or not. And I didn't drink or pick up a drug, no matter what. And you know what? It was enough. It was enough. It kept me sober long enough to be able to consider who God really was. And we do that when we get to the 11th step. And little by little, I learned more and more about what it meant to be a follower of Jesus Christ and a person of integrity in recovery whose walk equaled her talk. At first, we do a lot of talking, but it takes a while for the walk to get equal to the talk. Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6 became a favorite Bible verse of mine. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. He'll make your path straight. So to make a long story short, as you know, I'm a pastor. And let me tell you, that was a crazy, strange ride that brought me from exotic dancer to the Board of Ordained Ministry of the United Methodist Church. And seriously, friends, there is just not enough time today to tell that story. But hear this. With Jesus and a disciplined program of honest recovery, the best you can do anything. Anything. And that is a fact. I am living proof because they don't ordain people like me. I have no special talent at staying sober. I don't have some special intelligence that got me from zero to hero. But nonetheless, here I am telling this crazy story to you. And that's pure and simple, the power of Jesus and recovery. So I beg of you, give the program of recovery a long, persistent, honest trial for yourself, and you'll see. God has a plan for your life. He put you on this earth for a purpose, and if you stay sober long enough, he will lead you to places, you never imagined. He will mold you into the person he always knew you could be. So I want to end with this, and it's a long ending, so the band doesn't have to come up yet, okay? Or else I'd be standing there going, I thought she said it was the end. I want to begin to end with this. I don't believe that we practice our recovery, that we work the steps and go to meetings and work with a sponsor and learn the Bible and pray and worship and engage in service and do all those things. I don't believe that we do all those things for the times when things are good. I don't think our faith in God and the way we live it out day after day, one day at a time, is for the 90% of the time when things aren't too difficult. Because really, 90% of the time when you're working your program and living out your faith, life goes pretty good most of the time. Maybe not perfect, but at least, we're not causing any more chaos in our own life or others, so usually life isn't too tragic. You have a place to live, you have things to eat, your relationships go more smoothly as you work on them, and the earth is still on its axis. Life in recovery is a beautiful, hope-filled experience, full of purpose and excitement the majority of the time. I believe we practice our recovery not for these times, but it's for the times when tragedy strikes, and when life is unfair, and when the earth goes off its axis. Let me explain. I'm going to go roundabout. There's this recovery axiom that says, don't make any major decisions or changes in your life in the first year of your recovery. And this is a funny axiom, considering that in the first year of your recovery, they also tell you to change everything. But I think that what the don't change anything axiom is talking about is not voluntarily doing things like changing careers or your place to live or leaving your spouse or moving to another state, up and doing these, crazy things that we like to do, things like that. Of course, if you're in an abusive situation or a bad environment, you change those, but you don't just get some idea to, change major things in your life because you're bored or uncomfortable and then act on these impulsive ideas. Now, along with the don't change your life situations axiom goes another axiom. Don't get into any romantic relationships in the first year of your recovery. Anybody hear that? Oh, yeah. Well, during this past week, I talked to one of the girls I sponsor who might be embarking into both of these things, changing a place to live and also maybe looking at a romantic relationship. She's legal to do these things. She's got over a year of sobriety, right? But as we chatted, I got a chance to ask her the question, why do you think these axioms exist? Why do we tell you not to change anything or to get into a relationship in your first year of recovery? Why do you think? And she answered with the common answer. And here's the common answer. Well, because I really don't know how to make good decisions yet until I'm a year sober, and I don't really know how to have a relationship. I haven't learned to do that before a year, and then I'm ready after a year. Now that's the common answer, but I don't think it's the right answer because it doesn't make any sense. Stick with me here. We don't know anything more about relationships or how to live well after a year in recovery than we did while we were still in our unrecovering state. We haven't had any practice time, so we can't be better at it. Realistically speaking, the only way to get better at something is to do it. You don't just get better by not doing it, right? So I think the real reason we're not supposed to change anything, including our relationship status in the first year of our recovery, is for one reason and one reason alone. In 1 year of practicing good recovery, working steps, going to meetings, with a sponsor, and a community of faith around you, you have presumably and hopefully built up some tools and some habits. And with those tools and those habits, when you begin to make life happen, when you begin to make life changes, when you begin to embark in relationships and things go terribly wrong, which they are going to do. They are bound to go terribly wrong because you haven't learned to live yet, and so things are going to go wrong, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. When that happens, at least you will have the tools and the habits so you don't relapse. That's why we wait the year. So you have tools to use, and you won't relapse when you practice the difficulty of life. It's really all about staying clean and sober. It's about not practicing our hurts, habits, and hang-ups so that we can stay sober long enough so that God can keep working on us. Now, I share this with you because I have found it to be true throughout my recovery and my faith journey that the reason that I have to stay in fit spiritual condition, growing in relationship with Christ, working a disciplined program of recovery, is that there is going to come a time when tragedy strikes, when the worst of life happens, when I am beyond human aid and my life is completely out of my control. And it's during those times that only a deep well of recovery and faith and a deep toolbox can save you. So 5 years ago, this happened to me. My recovery was sorely tested. In the beginning of the testimony, I told you about my little sister, Dorothy. That little girl who I was carrying around in my arms in all my testimony pictures, my precious sister, Dorothy, she died 5 years ago. She got sick all at once, and then she died from some mysterious disease on her 43rd birthday. Still nobody knows what it was. Well, I couldn't believe it. It happened so fast. She was my best friend. She was like my daughter. We were so close. And she just up and died. The pain from that was indescribable. Now, up to then, I had had both my parents die. I had had my grandmother die. My friends had died. I had had a couple of ex-husbands die. And I had never felt anything like the grief I felt from losing Dorothy. And then the month after she died, I got an advanced case of salmonella poisoning, and I landed in the hospital for a week. I was so sick, I really thought that I was going to follow my sister into the grave. When I remained so sick I couldn't function, 10 days after leaving the hospital, I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm and went back to the hospital for another few weeks. It turned out that there were a few blood clots in my brain, as well as some in my ankle. All in all, I spent over a month in hospitals and a few months after that recovering. Well, 2 months later, I fell off the church altar on Christmas Eve and I dislocated my hand. And 3 months after that, I got into a severe car accident in which I totaled my car. Part of me wondered if I had a death wish. You know, throughout this, the death of my sister continued to torture me. My loneliness was very intense, a loneliness that no other human being could feel. Those of you who have lost people you love so much understand what I am talking about. But here's the deal. I stayed clean and sober through all of it. That's the point. Recovery practices and people, combined with my higher power, Jesus Christ, saw me through it all. Recovery is for real life. It's not for sitting in here. It's not for sitting in those rooms. It's for real life. And it's not just for the good times either. It's for the bad times too. Jesus is God of all of our life circumstances. Now, I don't want you to get me wrong by this sad litany. I have a life second to none. 31 years of consistent recovery in Jesus has provided me with more than I need. I have a blessed life. My home is a haven for me. I have enough money. I'm blessed to be surrounded by good friends. I serve the best church in all of history, the Central Campus of Grace Church in downtown Fort Myers. And it's filled with amazing Christ-following people, and I have purpose, and I even have some success. But like I said earlier, I don't think that's what recovery and maintaining a faithful walk with Jesus is for. It's for the time when the earth leaves its axis, when the impossible happens, when you are beyond human aid. That's when you need to have worked your recovery, walking a long time in the same direction, consistently. And it's when you need the habit of turning to Jesus so you don't relapse during those times. That is what I pray for each and every one of you tonight. And now I am ending, so if the band wants to come, they can come. That is what I pray for each and every one of you tonight. A rich and consistent recovery process whereby your life gets better day by day, one day at a time, and your relationship with Jesus Christ continues to grow and to sustain you through every season of your life as you're transformed into who God always meant you to be. Jesus and recovery is an unbeatable combo. So let me say this. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Keep pushing through. Don't quit. Remember what I said in the very beginning, life is better with Jesus and with recovery. And it really works if you work it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. God bless you. You know, sometimes it can seem like recovery is a piece of cake, but other times recovery is like a battle. You know, and the battle rages on. You know, and we need to surrender to God. And we need to lay down all of those things that are keeping us from Him. Because we're really going to need Him. There's going to come a time, maybe today you feel like you're doing okay. But there's going to come a time when earth is off His axis and we need to have a strong relationship with God. And today is the day. Today is the day to come and surrender, to lay down anything that's keeping you apart from your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. lay down anything that's keeping you apart from working the steps, to lay down anything that's keeping you from getting a sponsor tonight, to lay down anything that's keeping you from doing service work to God, to lay down anything that's saying, oh, I don't think I need to do this higher power thing. I think I can do it without it. To lay down anything that says, no, I think that all I need is Jesus. I don't need to go to any of those outside kind of meetings because I can do it on one day a week just on praying. Any of those preconceived notions that are holding you back, it's time to lay it down. It's time to surrender because recovery is a battle, especially in the beginning. And let me tell you, when you're right in the middle of it, you got 5 years, you got 10 years, you got 15 years, and earth leaves its axis, you're going to need to have that fully surrendered life to God. And so this altar is open right now. Now is the time to come. Flee to it. Come to it. Throw yourself on it. Because God can do for you what you cannot do for yourself. So come.